From Moment to Movement with Tamara Banks has been made possible through the generous support of the Anchor Point Foundation, helping nonprofit organizations and leaders creatively solve problems in their communities around the world.
Racism is steeped into the very core of this country, and now, in 2020, Black voices are tired of being ignored, muffled, and killed. Millions of Americans are demonstrating, protesting, to make their voices heard, especially Black Americans. A movement has to arise from the ashes of the moment. From Moment to Movement is a series of one-on-one truth-telling conversations with the Black community, aimed at working towards addressing police brutality and changing systemic racism.
Hi, I'm Tamara Banks, and this is From Moment to Movement, a platform for Black voices to be heard, unfiltered and uncensored. We're experiencing an important moment. As recently as the beginning of this year, it wasn't very popular to have tough, honest conversations about police brutality or to organize and protest against systemic racism. But in the spring, we saw not days, but weeks of demonstrations. From Moment to Movement aims to provide a platform for Black voices. Now, while it's not the Black community's responsibility to educate white people, From Moment to Movement will provide information on resources for white folks who want to learn how to engage in thoughtful, respectful, meaningful conversations with African Americans. Get educated about things like Jim Crow, understand how systemic racism really works, and hear from people who will share dehumanizing experiences. We'll talk about racial battle fatigue, white fragility, and discuss how the system is built around whiteness. What you're about to hear are passionate, heartfelt thoughts and feelings and real-life stories. We start with Makisha Booth, founder of SistaBiz. Makisha, thank you so much for joining us. So great to see you again.
You too. Thanks for having me, Tamara.
You bet. So listen, we've been experiencing the news in which more and more information comes out about the three most recent police killings, Ahmaud Arbery in Brunswick, Georgia, George Floyd in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota, and Breonna Taylor in Louisville, Kentucky, and so many more that we can't even name that would take the entire program. And so now we're speaking and seeing more protests, demonstrations, and rallies, and like I said, even riots. It feels like this is an important moment. How are you feeling about this moment, this moment in time? How are you feeling?
Wow, that's a big question because I'm feeling so many different ways about this moment in time, and there are so many layers to my emotions and to how I'm processing this and the perspectives that I bring as a mom, as a business owner, as a Black woman, as a mother of a Black son who is 19, and African-American nephews and nieces that are out and about living their life, and it could be them in any moment experiencing but for the grace of God. And so for me, there's a lot of layers, there's a lot of emotion. There is a difference in the response right now to the riots on the part of people that are non-Black. That is surprising for me, and that's a lot to process as well. I haven't seen that in my lifetime. I'm not saying it hasn't happened before, but there's the magnitude of the reach of the movement this time. It's in countries everywhere, and the internet really helps to magnify the reach as well. And so there's just a new level to what's happening because it's not a new issue. It's not a new response. And it's just the magnitude and the level at which it's happening right now that really has me still processing and trying to figure out how to manage and deal and contribute to the movement.
Yeah, I think you are absolutely right. There is something different about this moment in time, and the allies that we're seeing are folks you wouldn't normally see. They're not the usual suspects. You expect to see white liberals and young people and even people who helped white allies who helped push forward the civil rights movement and then the Civil Rights Act. But for whatever reason, the tipping point is finally here, and seeing people step up and come forward. And I often wonder when that movement sort of started. If this is a moment, and the movement is just, you know, we're in it right now. Like, when did it all begin? What are your thoughts on that? Like, was it just when we saw these latest high-profile police killings, or was there something else, an undercurrent going on that maybe we didn't recognize? What are your thoughts?
I think it started the first time anybody in the African diaspora decided to fight back. So hundreds of years ago. And I think, and I say that really deeply because I was talking to a friend who is not Black the other day, and I was telling her, you know, I get that you are intensely impacted by what you saw in that video and what's happening around the world, and you're emotional and you want to do something about it. But I want you to take that level of energy that you're feeling right now and imagine that we're feeling, as Black people, we're feeling that energy. And we're feeling that energy, processing what we see, because it is us. So we see ourselves in that man, we see our sons in that man. Then we are processing this for the entire diaspora, because there's a collective heavy weight feeling around what's happening right now in the racial trauma of today, of the current experience right now we're experiencing. And then there's the PTSD, the generational weight that we're carrying. So I'm not just feeling what I'm feeling for George, I'm feeling it for George, for my son, for my family, for my grandmother, for my great-grandmother, for the generations ahead of her. And so there's layers of pain that are coming to play in what I'm experiencing right now as I process what's happening. And so I think it started hundreds of years ago, and that's the issue. The issue is that it's not just today. And when people ask you how you feel about seeing an email pop into your, or a chain of emails pop into your email box where white organizations are saying we stand for this and this is wrong, you feel some type of way because you've been saying that for your entire life, and generations prior to you, they've been saying it, and many people died just to get to that email of acknowledgement. We won't even talk about action.
Well, you raise an interesting point, that it's almost like, and I'm not a therapist, I don't play one on TV, but I think about, as a reporter, when I knock on someone's door and I say, I'm so sorry for your loss. Can you tell me about your child that was killed in Columbine or the Aurora movie theater, or when I'm covering the genocide in Sudan. And when the person tells their story, they're being re-traumatized. And while I think it's good and we need to bring this out, there has to be, I'm thinking, maybe a mechanism and a space for people to be able to have this conversation and feel like, okay, I'm really living through this every day. Now I've got to explain this to you. And that in and of itself can be traumatizing. Am I on point with that, you think?
On point, and I'm going to take it a step further. I feel like, imagine that person that knocked on your door and asked you how your son was doing, their parents or they were the ones who killed them. So the oppressor is even asking. And so it's important to understand that relationship there. When you are asking me to explain to you something that your people have done to my people, then that relationship dynamic is, and then if you look at the relationship dynamics that are happening depending on who's asking who in the current environment today, maybe it's the boss asking someone in the work environment. So you don't feel safe talking about that stuff in an authentic and vulnerable way in the work environment, where there are power dynamics and where you had to code switch and where you have had to manage gaslighting and manage racism in that environment just to make it. And then you come to me in this situation where there's so much pain, and you want me to then engage with you on the topic. It's you got to be sensitive. You got to be thoughtful if you're truly interested in being an ally, in how you ask and who you ask and when you ask, and make sure that you're not just kind of throwing it out there and having expectations that someone wants to engage in that type of conversation. Not everybody's ready. Some people are, and that's good, but everybody has to decide in this moment what they need to heal, to restore, to participate.
And I think that's the what happens when you're in that white privilege space. You feel like you can just ask somebody right now boldly, like, well, what's happening, and tell me how you feel, and explain this to me. It's almost like, let me touch your hair, you know, if
Right.
someone's wearing their hair. Like, I didn't give you permission to do that. So it's almost like we should probably have some sort of tips for people who want to engage and really intentionally have the intentions of doing something good, to kind of guide them through how to be most helpful.
Yeah. And I think that we are trying to figure as a people, and I'm speaking largely for myself, my friends, my immediate family, the network that I lead. We are trying to figure out how to get ourselves through this situation. We're trying to heal. We're mourning. We're hurting. We don't have time to take care of other people when we're trying to figure out how to just get ourselves through these moments. And so, no, I can't speak on your panel, and I can't dialogue about this right now. That might be my answer, or I might not respond at all. And you need to be okay with that, because everybody has to find their way and take care of themselves and get themselves and their families through this time.
And please don't tell me all lives matter, because clearly if all lives had mattered, we wouldn't have to have this conversation of Black Lives Matter. Yeah. Let me ask you a question about the conversation that we have with our young folks. I don't have kids, but I've got now step kids. I call them bonus kids. And I've got younger nieces, nephews, and cousins, about how you conduct yourself when you're out in places where you might run into the police. And then now it's even kind of doubled up, and the volume is turned up, and how we train our young people to behave almost like apologetic for who they are and how they look. How do you have that conversation with your son?
Well, I've been having these conversations with my son way too early for him to his age was very early, and he shouldn't have to have those conversations. Nobody should have to have those conversations with their child so young. But I wanted to protect my son, just like my mother and father wanted to protect me. And going down the generations, like starting with slavery, parents have had to not just raise kids, but they've had to raise kids and shield them from death and murder and racism, and survival of racism. And so the reality is that I had to have conversations with him very early on. And he's in a mostly white environment growing up here where I'm at in Denver. And so, whereas I grew up in Harlem, where I rarely saw people that weren't Black. And so it was a dynamic for me to learn how to show him how to carry himself for his own safety. The things that I did with my son were I really tried to empower him to understand how strong he is, how great he is, how powerful he is, and how everybody doesn't agree with that. And that the devil's a lie. So I really want you to understand that there are lies out there about you. There are myths out there about you. And here's who you are, young prince. And show him through education. So he was reading the new Jim Crow in junior high school. He read the People's History of United States in 6th grade. His white school called me and said that he laid out a very graphic, detailed version of Columbus, raping land and massacring people on Columbus Day. When they were trying to celebrate Columbus Day, he let them know what the holiday really was. So I've always been really honest with my son and really showed him, because I had to, because I wanted him to be able to deconstruct all of the lies and the myths that would hurt him. I lead in the Sister Biz Network. I lead every month a Black Girl Therapy session. Yesterday was Black Girl Therapy session, and we had Dr. Candace Nicole, who is the director of Healing Racial Trauma, the Center for Healing Racial Trauma in the University of Kentucky. And she's a guest who talked with us about racial battle fatigue and racial trauma yesterday. And every month we have a therapist or a mental health professional or researcher come in and talk to us about these words and these things that we are experiencing in racism and discrimination, like code switching, gaslighting, invisible labor, white tears and white fragility. All those things are actual terms and concepts. And I found that my strength has lied in knowing my history educating myself and knowing exactly what the true story is and what really happened to my people, and the intentional genocide and project around, you know, breaking down an entire people, the new Jim Crow, the old Jim Crow, you know, and understanding the concepts and the names and the things that are happening to me, even in this day and age. As a result, they still have carried on in the workplace, in interracial relationships. Our entire system is built around whiteness, and anything that is not of whiteness is viewed as wrong, is not validated. And so understanding that and knowing the concepts and the terms as they happen to me in situations has empowered me. So that's what I do with my son. I make sure he understands, he reads, he really understands the history and how whiteness and blackness even came to be, because that's a man constructed thing. And so it's really about educating him and helping him understand so that he can defend himself with knowledge, as well as, you know, all the other things we have to put into place for their safety.
That's a really good point. We're often so quick to say the white community needs to educate themselves, and we ourselves are so ill-informed. It can be very sad. You know, the whole purpose of this show is to provide a platform so voices can be heard. And so I want to ask you, Makisha, as we wrap up, what does the white mainstream America need to hear that they haven't heard yet?
I don't know if they haven't heard it yet, but I know that I want to repeat it if they have heard it and reinforce it. And that's that, you know, before this became the sexy news cycle of the day right now, a lot of us were on the front line fighting to say what's being now okay to say. It's okay to say these things now, but they haven't always been okay to say. As early as a month or two ago, it wasn't okay to do certain things or say certain things that everyone is seeing as now the movement. And so two things I want to kind of say in relation to that. The first is that a lot of us have been on the front lines. Many of our ancestors have died just so you could get to the place where you acknowledge the injustices that you're now currently acknowledging. And so just know that there's 400 years of a fight to just get us to this day. And we're dealing with and managing that. And if you're going to join in, what I want to say is be in it to win it all the way for long-term, meaningful transformation, action-based work around this work, both internally working on your own soul and spirit and mindset and educating yourself, and then institutionally and systemically making changes that, you know, will change the way that we've been treated and change the things that have happened in this country so that our children don't have to experience this. And so I guess what I'm saying is I want to see what this looks like past the news cycles that are coming in these next few months. I want to see this work continue on and turn into change policy, changes in resource allocation, changes in laws, changes in the way that we, you know, build culture, organizational culture. What's right is not, you know, white is no longer right, but I want to see cultural changes. And so if you're down for the specific and the cultural changes, then I feel like then, you know, I really feel like that's the real work right there.
That is the real work. Thank you, Makisha. Our next guest is Adrian Eatman. Adrian is a TV producer and digital media manager. He also works with us here on From Moment to Movement. Adrian grew up in Colorado Springs and is a digital media manager at PBS 12. He currently lives in downtown Denver near the Capitol building and has been and seen the protests firsthand. Adrian, so great to see you. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you.
Thanks for having me today, Tamara. I really appreciate it. And once again, thank you for giving me a chance a long, long time ago. Really appreciate
it. You're so awesome to say that all the time. And you're awesome. So as I mentioned, we are in this space where it's not the first time we have seen unarmed Black men and women killed at the hands of police officers across the country. And now we're at this tipping point, though, because we're not just having these protests, riots, and demonstrations in the cities where they occurred, be they Minneapolis or Atlanta or Louisville, Kentucky. They're happening all across the country and around the globe. I mean, this is truly a moment.
Can you tell me how you feel during this moment? What's going on in your mind?
Well, I mean, it's definitely a little bit overwhelming. Like I've never, really been through anything like this before, but, at the same time, I think it could really be, a watershed moment for people where people can, really, really come together and, try to understand what other people are going through and, just take a look at everything as a whole and see like how much further we need to go. I mean, it's clearly obvious by, the uproar and everything that's happened thus far that, we really, really haven't come that far in, certain aspects. And racism is still around today. And, the thing that's kind of that I struggle with is like hardest for me is just the people that don't understand why Black Lives Matter, or don't want to say it, or, Blue Lives Matter and All Lives Matter. But I mean, to be honest, it's honest that all lives matter, but it's disproportionate, like the amount of, Black and brown men and women have lost their lives, over the last couple of years. And the thing that, just kind of brings it to the forefront is like now we're seeing it, right? Because everybody has cameras, there's a cell phone, everything else like that. So I think about how many names we don't know about or will never know about because it wasn't out here and it wasn't, in the public view, because this has been going on for years. And, it's just a lot right now. I mean, like going outside, is a little bit much. Sometimes just, especially right now, depending on what side you're on. And the fact that, like I live down the Capitol building, you got people from both sides. So you don't know which way it's coming from. One night I had my windows open and I was just sitting here watching a movie and I saw the lights going back and forth. And, I really, really didn't understand what was going on because I'm like, I live on the 6th floor. What's this all about? I go out to my balcony and, people are just running down the street, throwing tear gas back up. And I'm like out there watching it in shock. And I got tear gas. I had to come inside and, wash my eyes out and relax. But I mean, for me, it was, growing up in Colorado Springs and coming up here when I was younger and always being around and enjoying the Capitol building, to see it surrounded by tear gas. And if you see it today and, it's been tagged and there's stuff everywhere, it's real. But at the same time, people are angry, and they're only going to be sick and tired for so long before they start to do something about it. So, I mean, it's important that, people acknowledge this moment and see where they fit in and, how they can make things a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be in your own balcony and be tear gas, that must have been pretty stressful. Talk to me about what it's like to be walking in downtown Denver as a Black man and some of the experiences you have felt, be they microaggressions or tougher aggressions, harder aggressions, full out in your face aggressions.
Oh yeah, it's definitely it's definitely pretty challenging sometimes. Like, I hang out with my cousin a lot and sometimes we'll go places and we're just hanging out or, things like that. And we're going to go wherever we want. I mean, we're two hardworking males. Doesn't matter if it's Cherry Creek, Capitol Building, somewhere, anywhere else. But this is sometimes we'll go in places and you'll just see like the whole crowd just kind of look like, what are they doing here? And then sometimes it's happened to me when I was by myself. I just went and, I wanted to get like an old fashioned or something like that. I just went to a bar. And the bartender, he like comes over to me and I'm like, okay, so what kind of whiskey you have or whatever else like that. And he's like, yeah, the whiskey here is, it's top shelf. So I'm not sure. It was like, grab that bottle of Glenlivet over there and set it down. I'm done. It's like, you just like, what Brandon mentioned before, it's like just the fact that you're automatically already assuming that I can't pay for something or maybe I shouldn't be here, and, it's happened a couple of times and like, let's see here. One of the like more microaggression times to me that like really kind of shocked me is, I was at work and, I just got my car. Not that it's a big deal or nothing else like that. I mean, it's just a car and it always will forever be a car. But, I work really hard to get my car and I used to drive trucks. But so I go out to my car. I'm walking out to my car and this lady, she gets out of her car and she just lets it slam up against my car like super hard and was like, hey,
oh, wow.
Excuse me, would you just, You know, I'm just like, hey, excuse me, would you just be a little bit more careful when you're opening your car door and everything else like that? And she just kind of looked back at me like, oh, well, it's no big deal, scoffed, and then walked away. And then like it took everything in my body to like, you know, just tell her exactly how she needed to be told and, you know, let her know what time it is. But the fact that she made an ass of herself, so I just assumed that she didn't know any better. So what I told her was like, look, if I come out here and your car's next to me, you're paying my whole vehicle. That's the end of the story. Like, I don't have no time for you. Then she was like, oh, kind of threatened. I was like, oh, man, maybe I need to chill out because I don't want her running in here saying Adrian's going crazy. But that's not the fact. She did not have respect for me or my property. It was just like, oh, I'm just going to be out here doing whatever I want to do, and nobody's going to say anything. Like, this ain't no big deal. And that's not what time it was because, I mean, you got to show people a little bit of respect, and we're all in this together, you know, like, have respect.
I think some people would say, well, that's not, I'm not racist just because I didn't think you could afford the top shelf, but that is racist because really racism is about judging somebody by the color of their skin, by making an assumption that because they might come from a certain neighborhood, they may or may not be able to afford X, Y, and Z. You know, you're shopping in a mall, in a high-end store, or, you know, an economic store, what have you, and somebody's following you around, assuming, making an assumption that you are going to steal something or there and can't afford it. And so that is racism. I think people need to be very clear and understand that is the case, and it's hurtful.
Yeah, and you made a great point, Tamara. I mean, like, there's one thing that happens to me so frequently, well, not frequently, but more than it should, that I don't even, you know, think about it. Like, there's been numerous times where I've gotten out of my car and somebody's asked me, is that your car? I'm like, no, I just stole it here downtown Timber with my keys. You know, and then they'll have the audacity to ask me, what's your profession? What job do you have? Like, who are you? You know, I'm out here minding my business. Like, I don't ask you how you became so corny. I just let you go on about your day. So it's just, I don't understand it at all.
I'm laughing because it's not funny, but it's like what gives you the right, the privilege to even ask such a absurd question? It's none of your business. And so on that level, you know, we can kind of roll our eyes about it and even chuckle. But then when you have somebody who has that mentality and they're wearing a blue uniform, they're carrying a badge, and they're carrying a lethal weapon, those assumptions can end with deadly consequences. And that's what has happened, that we've witnessed over the past several years. And really, when we think about it, many call this a different form of lynching, that lynching has never stopped. You know, the slave patrols in the 1700s and 1600s were that. They were law enforcement that went on and looked for unsanctioned gatherings of Black people, of slaves, and shut it down. And that mentality in many police departments hasn't changed. Would you say that that's true with your experience?
In relationships with cops, I would say, yeah. I mean, you know, one of my family members is actually in law enforcement. So, you know, I can understand, like, nobody's all bad and things like that. But hell, at the same time, too, we'll be driving around in my car or whatever, and we're just, you know, doing our thing. And he's like, hey, man, look, you got me with me. You got nothing to worry about. And it's sad, but at the same time, too, that's true. Like 1,000% true. You know, if I see law enforcement I always make sure that I don't speed. You know, I make sure my windows aren't too tinted, my plates. Like, the last thing I want to do is have, you know, interaction with the police or be pulled over or something like that. And then, yeah, it's terrible. You know, like, one of the other things that happened to me that it's really, really, really disappointing actually is happened to me in Boulder. Actually, I was with a couple of my good friends. We were probably like 24 at this point. It was Boulder, probably about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We were right down on Pearl Street, kind of like, you know, where Pearl Street goes directly through the mall. I don't even remember what it was like. I don't go to Boulder anymore because I've had such great experiences, let's just say that. And we're walking across the street. We're going from alley to alley while everybody else is going through the crosswalk. And if you've been to Boulder, you know, you just walk across the street, you got to stop. I mean, that's what time it is. But so the three of us are walking across the street, just trying to cross. And, I see the police officer over there. I'm like, we ain't doing nothing wrong. We're just crossing the street. It's no big deal. So he gets out of his cop car. He comes over to all three of us. He's like, what are you guys doing? And we're like, we don't know. We had no idea. We thought we might get something for lunch. We're just hanging out. And he's like, all right, we need to see everybody's IDs. So this is the funniest part. We go to put our hands in our pockets to get our IDs. He's like, don't put your hands in your pockets. So then we go like this. He's like, all right, now you guys are being smart asses, sit on the ground. And it's just like,
wow,
what are you talking about? This blows my mind right now. So
right.
Like at this point, we're just normally sitting on the ground. He takes all three of our IDs. He goes over to his police car and he runs them. And then it's like, okay, so you're just hoping that some jaywalkers were going to have some outstanding warrants on them or whatever. So my ID and my other friend's ID goes through rather quickly, but my other friend, it doesn't. So at this point, he's like, hey, excuse me, sir, could you put your hands behind your back and sit on the curb? And me and my other friend are just sitting there at this point like, what is even happening right now? Long story short, he ran all of our IDs and nothing happened. But in the bigger picture, it was a really diverse group. It was me, my other friend he's Filipino, and my good friend who is white. And then as soon as that was done, he told me, he was just like, wow, this is crazy. I had no idea it was even like that. It was like, yeah, man, you have at no time you never know. And I think that experience for him kind of opened it up for him. So like
your white friend.
Another thing that happened for my white friend is like, because I went to CU for a little while, I would have this Nike backpack, right? I just be minding my own business, walking through campus. Nice game, man. Good job. What's up? And I'm like, first of all, how smart are you? What position do you think I play? I'm like 5'8", 150. So obviously, what, you think I'm a punter? Like, yeah, man, give you some notes, get us tickets. And it's just like, wow. You just all those black people up here to see you just play sports, huh? And then I think the thing for me is like, you can say a lot what you want about the Springs, but with it being diverse and you played sports, you don't have those type of interactions in the Springs. Like you don't have to tell anybody like you ain't supposed to say nigga when you're saying a rap song or something like that. They know that. Or people around you know that because they will get slapped or something will happen. Because as much as they talk about the Springs being conservative, you're down there and I have not ran into any of those people for the most part that were in my group that don't know what to say for any race or anything else like that because we had to be tolerant. My high school was extremely diverse. So, you had to know your place. It didn't matter if it was, black or brown or anything. You just had to be ready or something was going to happen to you. Like, they were not playing. So,
right.
I've never, like, none of the people that I've grown up with or anything else like that are my close friends or things like that has ever been an issue. The only thing that's kind of been a little bit dicey, like in the Springs when I was growing up, was like when I was playing baseball. But other than that, it was good to go from there.
That's interesting. That's interesting to hear you say that about Colorado Springs. As we wrap up, Adrian, what do you want America to hear from you? What do you have to say? America hasn't been listening. White America hasn't been listening since before the formation of this country. So what, 300 or 400 years? You have the platform now. What needs to be said? What needs to be heard?
Well, first and foremost, needs to be said is Black lives do matter. And I think I hate it. For me, I hate it when people think that it's a bad thing that we're saying that nobody else's lives matter or, blue light. Let's not be stupid. We know everybody's lives matter. But for a while now, it seemed like the Black lives don't matter. And you need to take notice. And we're not playing around anymore. And I'm going to take a little bit further, if you can't understand why Black lives matter or why this is a big moment, then why don't you just remove race from everything and imagine, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud, imagine if those were white people, okay? And we were on the other side of it. They'd be coming for us already. It'd be rough. And they wouldn't be asking about or, going against our protests. Like, let's look at the senseless killings of these people's lives and understand that that is a problem, you know, and they happen to be Black. So let's take a stand, you know, and come together and try to learn more from other people, you know, realize we're not that much different, you know. I mean, you got to be able to come together and, you know, I think another part of it is have some empathy, you know. Why don't you try to put yourself in other people's shoes or understand what they're going through? Because it's a lot.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is a lot.
You say, I'm 36 years old and my mother still worries about me when I get home. Like if I leave her house and come over here at night or something like that, she is still worried about my safety. And I'm 36, you know, like at all times. And if that doesn't tell you like how bad it is or, you know, what's going on, it's serious out here. And, you know, there's definitely been times where, you know, I've decided not to go places or, you know, seeing police officers just like, yeah, I'm not really, don't have no interaction here. So, I mean, so we all need to come together and just, you know, take a look at it as a bigger picture and just understand that there are these senseless killings that have to stop. And, you know, this treatment of Black people and brown people, like, we got to take a look at ourselves. We got to do better, you know? We have to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And no mother should have to worry about her child not coming home simply because they might get stopped. You know, I often say when people say, well, all lives matter, well, clearly they don't. Otherwise, the theme of Black Lives Matter would never need to be said. Excellent point, Adrienne. Thank you for your candor. Some of the guests you'll meet here on From Moment to Movement have been working in the social justice space for quite a while. Our next guest is the host of a podcast called Off Color. Meet Rebecca Henderson. Our guest today is Rebecca Henderson. Rebecca is a filmmaker. She's working on a film called Running with My Girls, which is going to be awesome. And Rebecca, you're also the host of a podcast. Tell us about that podcast and that name.
So my podcast, thanks for having me, Tamara, sorry. My podcast is called Off Color, and that particular production came from working with a friend, our dearly departed friend, Dr. Gregory Diggs. He was my original co-host for the first 10 episodes. We wanted a place where we could talk about race and identity in a very real and sort of unfiltered way. My goal with it was to have conversations that, in part, to kind of spare your Black friend your questions. I'm like, I'll answer those questions. And so it just sort of started out filming in my basement. We took on a couple of iterations. We got picked up by a startup media company. Then startup media company went under. So it's a small thing, but it was something that I felt that the world needed at the time. Was that I just got exhausted, like listening, saying the same things over and over again, is what I think I'm trying to say.
Right. And so that's a really good point. We're in a space right now where some would say, well, we've seen this movie before with protests and demonstrations, rallies, vigils, riots, and then we have another unarmed Black person killed at the hands of police officers. Then we do rallies, demonstrations, riots, rinse and repeat. But it kind of feels like this is a little bit different. How are you feeling in this moment in time?
So, you know, I want to believe so badly that we're going to start seeing the changes that need to happen in order for America to be great. I don't think it's possible. Sorry. So one of the reasons I say that is because I'm what's called a loving generation baby. So my father's Black, my mother was white, and we were kind of born at a time, you know, of great upheaval in the nation. And there was a lot of feelings that, oh, these mixed race babies are going to save the world. That's love. And we're all going to just do it until everyone's a shade of beige or a tan, you know, and that's how we're going to make America. That's how we're going to get rid of racism. But you can't get rid of racism because I think that people don't actually understand the insidious nature of it. I don't think people really comprehend that the Constitution of the United States of America is a white supremacist document written by white supremacists. And I think that saying that makes me, whoa, but like all you have to do is look at the facts, like what's mentioned in there. Black people are 3/5 a person. There's no women. Native Americans are savages, right? So it's like we have this core at our in the country, like that. I just think people just don't truly understand. So that's what's happening, and I'm seeing it, and I feel like we're going to lose a lot of time actually on this idea that, oh, racism's real. Like, okay, I got it now. Oh yeah, Black Lives Matter. They do, yeah. Like, and then that's it. That's going to be the change. And I want to see policies implemented, right? And so even with that, like we had a historic vote last night for the Denver public schools where they removed police, they canceled their contract with Denver Police Department, having to have like SRO security officers in the schools. Mm-hmm. And people are furious. People are furious, and they can't.
What are they furious about? What makes them angry?
About police being taken out of the schools. They have been, just sending all this targeted, racialized, racial slurs and epithets at our Black school board members. And it's what the wild part of it to me is, even though it's exciting and it sounds radical, these are the facts. There was 18 police officers in the Denver public schools. At what schools? I don't have to tell you because you already know what schools they're at. Right. And so that to me is like, it's not even that many people. It's not that wild of an idea. There is security in the schools. They'll still call the police the same way they would if they needed to call the police for, a school shooting or whatever. And so, but to me, it's just wild that people are like, no, this is so crazy. It's like they shouldn't have been in the schools in the first place.
And the reason for the police officers in the schools, in Denver public schools and other schools, is I think maybe the intention was to give a sense of safety, but was it also, or intended to send a clear message about law enforcement and control?
I mean, for real, Tamara, is obviously it's me, but that's what I'm saying. So for me, part of being Black is that I know all of this information. I've been screaming about it, right? And it feels like, oh, finally people are catching on. But the police do not inspire a sense of feeling of protection for me personally, okay? And I've had somewhat positive interactions with the police in general, right? Like one time the alarm went off in my house, police officer came to check it out. And I will tell you though, totally nice dude, everything was fine. But when I had to go out to the car to like tell him something, I approached his vehicle and I was like, it's me, I'm a lady from the house, don't shoot. Like that really happened, And I wasn't kidding because I felt like, okay, I have to like be careful because I don't want to like surprise this police officer in his car because what might happen, right? And nothing was going to happen to me, But right. It's still the thought of it. And so seeing police, I grew up in a suburban school. We didn't have police officers.
Really?
No.
So you say that nothing's changed. What I find different about this particular moment in time is that in the news cycle is a good gauge of how long something is on top of mind for people, whether that's accurate or not. In any given community, I would say certain things are more important than, other communities. But that neither here nor there. In every major network, we're still leading, or at least the second story, with George Floyd's killing, with Breonna Taylor's killing, with Ahmaud Arbery's killing, and other people who have been killed in the past, unarmed Black men and women, and now videos coming forward. And then others who've since then been killed at the hands of officers. So it feels like it's still out there on top of people's minds versus the news cycle is typically 1, 2, maybe 3 days. Mm-hmm. And so that's why, to me, it feels a little bit different.
I know people just wanted a break from COVID-19. P.S. We're still in the middle of a pandemic that is disproportionately killing Black and brown people and poor people, right? That's still happening. So I think that even that is like, again, this is just my feelings, right? This is my perspective. Like, to me, it's like, it's too little too late. And then with Breonna Taylor, like, they made a law, Breonna's law, but they still haven't charged the police officers in her murder. Like, so it's like the small things that people aren't paying attention to that are still happening, that are showing me that maybe we're not changing in the way that we think we're changing, or shifting people's perspectives in the way that we think we are. Like, I think about the woman, Amy Cooper, who tried to have the police come to kill, the other Cooper. Sorry, I forgot.
Christian. Yeah.
They had the same last name. It was wild.
Right.
But like, she got her dog back. They just like gave her dog back. And I don't want to like punish a dog by taking a dog out of a home, but still, like, what are our priorities, And so to me, those kinds of things that are happening are just making me feel like, no, we're not. These changes are superficial. And when we look at all of the corporations covering it, because we're watching it, right? When we look at big brands sending out how many emails did you get from one of your subscription companies telling you, Black Lives Matter, we support the movement, blah, 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 blah. They want us to keep spending our money. Black money is powerful in this country. And so that's part of it too, is it's like, something about it is not resonating with me. And I don't know if I've just been burned too many times by like institutional racism. I don't know if it's because I've had, not personally, not on my exact person, but on members of my family, police violence, including death. So I don't know. Sorry, I'm like, I don't want to get all emotional, because I'm trying not to get too crazy up in here, so you don't air it. But like, that's the truth. Like, for me, that's the truth. Is like, I'm just not sure. And I'm watching it play out in real time in the neighborhood I live in, which is named after a Klansman. And the people still are like, I don't know if we should change the name. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to pull it together, y'all.
No, this is you're right. This is an emotional subject. And I think some people get weary of talking about it over and over and almost being re-traumatized by it. But the reason they feel re-traumatized is because it's so emotional and so real and it's so close to the bone. That's where it hurts the most. And so I think that we have to look, kneeling at a football game was like the worst sin football players and supporters could have done. Kaepernick was fired and has yet to play football. But we had Roger Goodell come out and say, well, gosh, I really apologize for things I said. Why? To your point, Rebecca, maybe people are rethinking about where they spend their money. And we may or may not have an NFL season just due to the pandemic, let alone what's happening in society. So if kneeling disrupts what you feel is right and respectful, or what's wrong and disrespectful to America, maybe if people took to the streets, which they have, that they'll be heard. And I think that's why people are, I'm not condoning rioting, but if you're not going to listen to me when I do it peacefully, how can I best get your attention? And so all of that is enveloped in this emotional ball that, by the way, you still have to go to work. You still have to walk down the street. You still have to go to the grocery store, and you can't express how you're feeling. And so when you're afforded an opportunity to, hey, how you feeling? It's natural for those emotions to well up and come out in tears or in, cussing or what have you. So I want you to say what you need to say and want to say.
Well, look out, Tamara. You asked for it. Here it is. I don't want to even hear people saying riots, because that in itself is like a legalese term that is used to make sure. And you know where it came from? It comes from the Tulsa, the bombing of Black Wall Street, because they said, well, it's a riot, not a massacre, so now we don't have to pay any insurance on it. You know what I mean? Like this is an uprising. This is a rebellion. And when people say they don't condone rioting, I don't know. I heard someone say this, and I really appreciated her words on it. And she said, I don't mind if it burns. Like, I'm not going to burn stuff, but I don't mind. And I feel like that. Like, I don't want people burning down my whole city. Obviously, on the other side of that, I'm like, what's a city if we're living in chains, if we're living under an oppressive regime? Like, what's the point? So we might as well take to these streets. However, I did not take to the streets because of the pandemic. So I keep trying to remind people that there is a pandemic. And I understand going out into the streets. And for me, that was it was like a really hard moment where I had to really look at my own like liberation goals and what I want for Black people in this country. Because I wasn't willing to like risk getting coronavirus by going to one of these marches or protests. And I'm older, I'm overweight, I'm in that group. My husband's immune compromised. Like, I had a lot of factors into making that decision. However, it made me realize like, oh, maybe I'm not willing to like die. But and the other side of that though is I was like, yo, I'm willing to get my head cracked in by some popo, but I'm not willing to do that and get coronavirus. I was like, I can't do it. I've done enough. That's how I felt for myself. I'm so grateful for all of the people who took to the streets when we could not. I'm so grateful for the journalists who were covering it and putting themselves in harm's way, because to your point about it still being in the news cycle, like, I think to me, journalism is probably, the key. That's the key to a democracy, is like a free press, and we are watching it get suppressed. So, sorry, I'm just like, yesterday I was on my porch with a friend of mine, a Black friend, and we see this dude running by in the park, and he's carrying this giant American flag, like a huge American flag, and just running with it. White guy. What do you think the message is that he's trying to send? Wow. Why is he carrying that giant flag? Why is he running with it? Why do you think he's doing that? Do you know?
Wow. Well, I can venture to say that the message may have been something like, this is America and this is the way we do it. And if you don't like it, you can leave it. I wasn't there. I'm just guessing. But
I have video. Sorry.
Did you feel, how did that make you feel?
No, it just makes me feel really frustrated that it's like, I'm telling you, this is a real thing, and I've been telling you. And now finally you're like, all right, oh yeah, there's a problem. But the thing that infuriates me is that people needed to watch 8 minutes and 46 seconds to believe us. That's what it took. Didn't take Philando Castile. It didn't take, Eric Garner. It didn't take Michael Brown. It didn't take all of the countless names that people don't even know. Like, these are the ones that got caught, right? How many other stories are there? And like Rodney King, right? So it's like, it just feels like it's over and over again. And I think that when we're really starting to think about what's happening, it's like, the slave-owning white males that founded this country are still running this country. And the Civil War, you know, people are like, it's a race war. You know, it's like, we've never been out of this war. Not really. All you have to do is look at a history book, and not a whitewashed one, that says the slaves was happy cooking George Washington's food. That dude wore slave teeth in his mouth for his dentures. Like, I understand this is what happened. We can study history, right? We don't go around naming things like, you know, Hitler Hill. Like, we don't do that. But here, you know, that's what we're doing. The country is founded in it, it's steeped in it, and it isn't, you know, people say it's white supremacy, it's in the water. It isn't in the water, it is the water. It's everything. And people really don't understand how it plays out.
Racism is the water. Wow, Rebecca, thank you for joining us. The divisive national debate on race and policing is at a boiling point, but it's been smoldering across the country for centuries. You can expect From Moment to Movement to bring you voices that have long been ignored and often negatively impacted by systemic racism. I hope you heard something that motivated you, that inspired you, that moved you into action. That's all the time we have for this edition of From Moment to Movement. Keep the conversation going on Facebook, Instagram, and pbs12.org. I'm Tamara Banks. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.
From Moment to Movement with Tamara Banks has been made possible through the generous support of the Anchor Point Foundation, helping nonprofit organizations and leaders creatively solve problems in their communities around the world.